Yo, this is Firstborn, Dark Christ Memoir, the continuation of the hypersexualization of the black female. Was on the last time dealing with the fact that this issue subconsciously programs women into who they're attracted to and who they allow into their lives and who they attach themselves to, because they have been hypersexualized by society, by the males, by the media, by education, by religion. What I want to talk about this time is some of the means of how this is done, and then why. Now, how this is actually done is very complex, and like I said, it is a process that has been 400 years in the making. But the beginning of all hypersexualization of people in general, but since we're talking about women here, is through abuse. That is the number one thing. The way you break the subconscious of a person, because the subconscious is extremely powerful and resilient, which we'll follow up on that fact a little bit later. But because it is so powerful and resilient, it requires a tremendous and consistent amount of abuse to reprogram the subconscious. And where we know that it begins is through the abuse of the conditions of the transportation of Africans from the continent to the U.S. in what is called the slave trade and the transcendental passage. Coming across, there were unspeakable things done to actually break the souls of the individuals coming through that path. And what was done in large cases of the women was molestation and rape. Because molestation and rape marginalizes the soul and the perception of a person into the place of that very act. And we must understand that that has been passed down from generation to generation. And unfortunately, that trait was picked up on by black males as well because of the breaking down of their soul. So what has happened now is, because that is such a deeply entrenched and traumatic event, and because it is so difficult and there are very few who know how to repair that or restore a person to that, the cycle continues on. Even to those who have not been raped and molested, the mental effects that the mother or the grandmother passes down to the mother, down to the daughter, generation after generation, takes on a type of hypersexualized behavior. Because once molestation happens, the individual is usually frozen at that event. So now how they process everything is through that negative sexual event, which the result of that becomes a hypersexualized individual who now relegates their worth to that event, and that event is sexual, so they become hypersexualized. And it causes an extreme, whether their appetite is largely towards a need for sexual attention because they can only process self-worth through that, or a total rejection of it. The focus is still a hypersensitivity to sexualization. Hard to get past the other parts of that to see the person or find worth in yourself. The other way that it's continuously going on is by setting up comparison of women and women. Women have been conditioned to compare each other based on how they appear. Why has that been done? Because it keeps them in the trap. Males are stimulated physically, and physically they're stimulated for sex, sexual intercourse, sexual desire. So if you can have women always competing physically to try to make themselves even more of a sexualized being, then it still keeps them in the trap constantly. So comparison. In this time, it has become much more complex on a much more subconscious warfare level, because now, as I said before, you have the media. So you have the media, you have the dark history of rape and molestation, and you have the comparative, the attempt to influence women to find their identity in comparison to other women based on who can be a better sexualized object to males. So this is how largely this is done. And then you also have the fourth wing. And the fourth wing is religion, which is dominated by males. It's a male-dominated institution. And because of that, it is also influenced in that environment for females to see themselves as sexualized, hypersexualized individuals. Now, you wouldn't think that, because the message is all about be moral, be good, be pure. But what it does is it puts the woman in a submissive role on a cultural level, not on a spiritual level. On a cultural level, you are there to please that man sexually and to please him physically, as far as cooking and knowing your role as being under the man, as opposed to walking beside the man, with the man as a partner. So religion has also amplified and supplicated the hypersexualization of black females by putting them in a role of seeing themselves as secondary human beings and sexual objects to males. So these are some of the means in which this has been done. So yeah, a lot of times you got these women in church and watching TV, and they put off images, they project it in such a way where the woman feels empowered, but at the end of the day, something in her she feels is lacking, and it's because nothing has undergirded the essence of the feminine power that exists within her. And right there is the source and reason. The feminine power is the reason why black females have been sexualized. So in the next one, I'm going to get to the purpose of why the hypersexualization of black females, because it has a very high and significant purpose, both physically and spiritually, on a universal and cosmic level. So this is Firstborn, another Dark Christ memoir. I'ma holler at y'all later. Peace.